welcome to it, to episode 2 of the Average Joe Sports Show. We say what's up to Bill Doleman, Mitch Sherman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Fellas, it is, smiles in Lincoln because the Huskers got a win. And you know what? It's something to think about as Louisiana Tech comes to town. And Nebraska has lots of ice, Advil, and some walking wounded in that running back room. Bill Doleman, hello. Mitch Sherman, hello. Elijah, good to see y'all.
Good to be here for episode 2. This is like the first real episode, right? We're doing this? This is a real thing that we're doing?
Yes, the pilot went and is still in the air, so it's episode 2.
And fairly well received, which was nice. We appreciate the compliments from the folks who got a chance to take a look at the soft debut of the Average Joe Sports Show, the rebirth of the Average Joe Sports Show, if you will, a radio show that Chris and I did. Oh, gosh, what was it? Early 2000s, 2001, 2, 3, 4, something like that.
Was Bill Doleman in the press box in Boulder in 2001 on Black Friday.
Well, that's ominous.
On a phone. On a phone.
Yeah, but it was, it was something that we wanted to do in Lincoln, local Lincoln radio, and do a sports talk show that got people in Lincoln involved, so it was kind of fun. We had businesses around town that sponsored the show, and they had some of their representatives would come in and hang out with us. We had a number of remotes around town and barbecues and spas and whatever else we could find, so it was a lot of fun. It's kind of nice to resurrect it again. I'm glad that people still remember it.
It was funny showing up to a lucky listener's home, and not only did the lucky listener win patio equipment, but he had a famous chef from Lincoln show up and barbecue for us. That was a Friday show on the Average Joe Sports Show.
So we get barbecue? That's the way this is going to go? We're going to
listen, if I could get someone, because I would want to invite all, that means Elijah gets out of his his closet behind all of us in the studio, and I would buy T-bones for everybody. I've got a patio set up, and I can grill for us.
All right, this is sounding better already. But it's great to be with you guys, as I said in our first test run episode, and thank you for involving me in the rebirth of the Average Joe Sports Show. I wish that we were coming to everyone with a little bit better news out of Nebraska camp than we have to report on this Monday as we're recording.
Isn't that amazing, the news that Matt Rule brought to the podium? Ramir Johnson, Gabe Irvin, Dwight Boodle, done for the season. That's not a good hat trick.
It's a tough hat trick, and you look at what is working right now for the Nebraska offense, and it's been the run game. And it's been a guy like Gabe Irvin that gets those tough yards. It's been Ramir Johnson as a steady guy that can catch the football and run tough between the tackles and, pick up a run blitz. And the guy you're not sure of, but you see all the talent in the world, is Anthony Grant, and a young pup that I really liked out of Minnesota, and Emmett Johnson.
Yeah, there's still some bodies there. Nebraska's going to bring Quentin Ives out of a redshirt year. He's the true freshman from New Jersey who had not been in Nebraska's plans, but you take Ramir Johnson out of this thing. He's got the shoulder injury, needs surgery, out for the year, maybe done for his career. Matt Rule referenced him as a senior today and how he was heartbroken for Ramir Johnson. Year of eligibility left, but I think this may be it for Ramir. He'll have a decision to make when he comes back from that injury. And then Gabe Irvin, this is 3 consecutive years with a season-ending injury early in the season. So, his status moving forward, just his viability as a running back with a hip injury. Running backs don't come back from hip dislocations real easily. I think this is maybe worse for him. It bodes worse than the knee injury that he had earlier in his career. So all of a sudden, you're just very thin at the running back spot. And coming off of a 35-11 win against Northern Illinois that really, I think, soothed some feelings around Husker Nation. People felt good about themselves as they left the stadium in Heinrich Haarberg's first start, after his first start on Saturday night. Now all of a sudden Monday morning, and Matt Rule walks into the press box on the 6th floor at Memorial Stadium to open his press conference, and you could just see the look in his eyes that he had some things to say that did not make him feeling too comfortable.
Well, it kind of reminds me of Like if you win a contest on the radio and your award is you have to host Bill Doleman and Chris Schmidt at your house for a live radio remote, like very similar comparisons to be made there. You get the win, but at what cost?
Hey, I
coming hard from in the box.
Yeah, yes, it is locked, so we just may not find the key right away. But no, I mean, what is the cost? And listen, the Nebraska game on Saturday night was one of those that Nebraska has lost. They have lost those get-right games in past years. Nebraska with backup quarterbacks, not a great record, historically speaking. So the win was big, but as we look at the running back picture, you know, Anthony Grant is somebody that you saw for 42 yards, 7 carries, 6 carries, 7 carries. But his yards per carry was nice. He's got that burst that we continue to talk about. And, you know, if he can just hang on to the football, he can be trustworthy. There's all sorts of upside with him as your primary ball carrier. I thought he was the most talented running back, but maybe not the most trustworthy running back.
Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt that he's the most talented running back on the Nebraska roster, and even was at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. Gabe Ervin was the guy throughout the offseason, really from January, when Matt Rule and his coaching staff handed the team over to the players and said, okay, you know, you guys need to be leaders in the offseason. Gabe Ervin was at the top of the list. From the very beginning, we heard about Gabe Ervin as a guy who was asserting control, and he was in all of the social media content as a guy out front. So to lose that now 3 games into the season is devastating, but the talent that you have with Anthony Grant is not to be questioned. It's just, is he going to be able to hold on to the football? It was an issue in a small way a year ago, and then in a big way against Minnesota in the season opener when Nebraska inserted Anthony Grant into the game with the drive potentially to ice that win. He loses a fumble, Minnesota goes down and scores a touchdown. It's a tie game. They kick a field goal to win it, and Anthony doesn't play the next week against Colorado. So here he is. It's his show, as Matt Rule said, and he's the only guy with any experience at all ready to play that position. Emmett Johnson and Quentin Ives have not carried the football as college players.
Speaking of show, we want you to like and subscribe to the Average Joe Sports Show. Check that out on YouTube, the AJ Sports Pod. Give us a follow on Twitter, and do both of those things as we'll be bringing you more college football, Nebraska, Big Ten thoughts as the year progresses. So we know where Nebraska's at running back. They are down to alternative options. We have touched on Grant. Let's focus on Emmett Johnson for a moment. Out of high school, Minnesota Player of the Year. Nebraska did well to get him. He's a guy that Ron Brown recruited when he was filling in as an assistant when Nebraska made their changes last year. I know in my past conversations with Emmett Johnson, really bright, passionate football player, multi-sport star, has some speed to him, and his role right now is as a kickoff returner along with Ramir.
You know, a guy like Emmett Johnson in this era of the transfer portal comes out of high school, so highly recruited, highly valued, leaves his home state where he was the player of the year. In this era, you almost expected if they don't play in year one that they're going to go back home or go someplace else. So for him to stick around and play for a staff that did not recruit him, although Ron Brown, of course, has been around for a long time, that says a lot about him and the opportunity that he has. But, you know, you see like a Sevion Morrison who came from Oklahoma. He's here, things don't work out, and he's gone. Goes to Kansas or wherever he went. But
I mean, same with A.J. Allen last year too, where things don't work out and boom, he's off to Miami.
Yeah, so for Emmett Johnson to stick around for a staff that he had to get to know, and you know during the spring and in the off season, you did not hear his name. You know, and if you did, it was rare. You heard about Ramir. Matt Rule loved Ramir Johnson. Talked about him being a third down NFL back. Loved Gabe Ervin and the heart that he gave. So they're losing that kind of leadership. And Quentin Ives, we haven't heard anything about since signing day. So now you've got all of this going on in Nebraska's backfield. Oh, by the way, with the quarterbacks as well. And this is a precarious time for Matt Rule, Marcus Satterfield, and that coaching staff to try and put together the right formula going forward.
E.J. Barthel, the running backs coach, just became the coach with the most difficult job on this coaching staff, because if if Anthony Grant reverts to some of the issues that he had in the preseason and in the season opener, what do you do? He has to be your guy now. You have to ride him. If he doesn't have the best ball security, it's really difficult to just say, okay, Emmett Johnson, you're the guy, you're the starting running back now. They need Anthony Grant to step up. So this is a big moment for him, and he's been through a lot in his career. Multiple schools. He's transferred twice, and he stepped up a year ago, but has just kind of had a rocky road with Matt Rule and this coaching staff. You'll remember he was suspended at the start of spring practice for a short period of time, got back, some things figured out, and then the issues in August this year. So now's the moment. I mean, this is it. He's well into his 20s. He's a senior. It's now or never for Anthony Grant. So in that sense, this is going to be an interesting story to watch because he's either going to fumble the ball, proverbially again, or we're looking at something that could be a really good story for Nebraska by the end of the year.
Because you look at the depth there, I think you have to expect at least 15 to 20 carries from Anthony Grant a game moving forward, if not more, depending on how the game scenario decides to play itself out. It's a guy that's gone from a break in case of emergency on your bench to your workhorse within, 3 days?
Look,
something like that.
Look, I'll throw something out, and I just thought of this now. It's only been a very short period of time that we've had to digest this news about these running backs. One of the guys, either Jeff Sims or Heinrich Haarberg, is going to be on the bench. We can talk later about who that might be. They're both pretty good runners. They're not traditional running backs, neither one of them. But can Nebraska afford at this point to have one of those guys on their bench because of the uncertainty that exists, the inexperience that exists? Can you play two quarterbacks at once? I mean, what's this thing? They have to think outside the box.
Well, let's go back and the running that we saw from Jeff Sims against Minnesota. He is Nebraska's best back running with the football, right? And his fumbles have not come when he's been running with the football. They've been snaps and some just very fundamental things. But against Minnesota, 19 carries, 95 yards or something like that? I mean, he is Nebraska's best runner. Anthony Grant is Nebraska's best running back, and that could be argued if everybody's healthy. He just can't hold on to the football. So, do you get a little crazy with some game planning? And we saw Haarberg catching passes against Minnesota. He's your backup quarterback, so why not put Jeff Sims in there if he's healthy to run the ball a little bit?
I'm not suggesting that they line up Sims or Haarberg in the eye behind a fullback or running the option in the running back position. But Haarberg has already shown that he can play some H-back. Well, I don't know. I think Sims is the kind of athlete who could do something creative if needed. So it's not going to be an every down situation. And I don't know who the quarterback's going to be Saturday, let alone when they get back into Big Ten play. But to have one of those guys on the bench, you're talking about two of your best athletes on the entire team. It might make sense for a play here or there, maybe every other series, to get the backup, whoever it is, into the game in some kind of a creative situation.
Well, we've seen it before. You got somebody out there with a cocktail napkin right now. He's got the pencil out, and he's going, we put them both out there. We put them both in the pistol. And Scott gets to pick which one he's going to snap the ball to. Coach Osborne. That's what we used to, that's what they would do. Tom would get these 12-man formations back in the day because people had an idea,
Well,
right, they would be sent to him.
They wouldn't be on a cocktail napkin, though.
Do you guys remember the first series against Ohio State in that COVID season, though, where you have like a 40-something yard rushing play from Luke McCaffrey, who's dotting the I formation. He takes a pitcher on the S. It's not unheard of at Nebraska to have a quarterback play in the running back spot. That's all I'm saying.
Gus loved it. He's still screaming about Mac's big run. Average Joe Sports Show going on here, the Average Joe Sports Show pod. Find it on Twitter at AJ Sports Pod, and check out the YouTube channel. Subscribe and like. Tell your buddies, the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube. Bill Doleman, Mitch Sherman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, Nebraska, and the wounded running back room, our topic of discussion. Let's go to talk about Ives for a second. And I know he was listed as a guy that busted a number of records, set a record for his high school conference with 14 consecutive 100-yard games to end his high school season, just shy of over 3,100 yards junior-senior year combined, 49 rushing touchdowns. And to cap off the statistics, a top 25 running back in the state of New Jersey and a top 100 player overall if you look at your On3 friends and how they rank running backs. So he's a bigger back, though, at 6'2", 6'3", closer to probably 200. And Matt Rule, pretty emphatic, fellas, about getting the young guys ready because your time is now versus walking around Memorial Stadium with him 24 hours to kickoff or before kickoff even, saying this will be your option someday to run the football here. Well, that time is now.
Now, Mitch, real quick, you mentioned E.J. Barthel. This is his guy, right? When he got the job as Nebraska's running backs coach, he says, hey, I got a guy in my neighborhood back in Connecticut in the Northeast region that we ought to take a look at, and that was the guy that he put his ace on, and Nebraska played it and got him.
Yeah, this is not a inherited recruit. This is not Cameron Lenhart, who was recruited by the old staff and then became a recruit of the new staff, committed to both staffs. It'll be interesting to see. One thing that Matt Rule and his coaching staff do not want to do is sacrifice the future for the betterment short term of this team. Now, they're walking a fine line because they want to build and they want to win. And this is a subject that I addressed last week in a story for The Athletic, is how do you balance that? How do you walk that fine line between winning and building? And Quentin Ives, right now, with what they're looking at, 3 games into the year, heading into week 4, he's the perfect test case, the case study on how to do this, because they had him targeted for a redshirt season. He was going to play at most in 4 games this year. And really, with Ramir Johnson and Gabe Ervin in the lineup, he wouldn't have even played in 4 games. It might have been 1 or 2. Now, do you play him in 5, 6, 7, 8 games? If Emmett Johnson and Anthony Grant and perhaps a walk-on or 2 can get the job done at running back, you might still be able to do something like that. But it didn't sound like that was the expectation for Matt Rule walking into week 4. I think they're ready for Quentin Ives to be a guy who plays the next 9 games, which is kind of scary if you're E.J. Barthel. Because, yes, he was your guy. He was the guy that you wanted to bring in there. But, Chris, you looked at his weight, and you thought, well, I think he's probably closer to 200 pounds. The roster lists him at 185. 6'2".
So he's put on 5 since high school.
Yeah, 6'2", 185. If that's really what he's at, and we'll find out, I think, as this week goes on. We're going to get the opportunity to talk to Marcus Satterfield on Tuesday, and we'll ask about Quentin Ives and if he's really ready or if they just need him to be ready because they don't have players ahead of him, enough players ahead of him. If he's 185 and he's going out there in the Big Ten as a running back who pounds it at you, I don't know. I think he still needs another year, and maybe it suits Nebraska best to try to keep him to 4 games.
Question for the room. We'll go around the horn on this. Do you remember a time, or does it still kind of make you pinch yourself, that Nebraska is in a situation where there are question marks at running back in the running back room? It never used to be that way. And, oh yeah, the offensive line's still a work in progress. Now, to Nebraska's credit, they found a way to get close to or over 200 yards the first 3 games running the football. That's a good devotion to be at with chewing up clock and pounding away at opponents. But, you have some unknowns right now at the running back spot, and you just never worried about who the next man up, at least I didn't as a kid growing up, the next man up at running back. It's been an issue right now for Nebraska.
I've been trying my darndest since Matt Rule took to the podium to give the news about Johnson and Ervin. When was the last time Nebraska found itself in this situation in the running back room? Now, not over the last 20. We don't maybe put the last 20 years in this conversation. You go back to when Nebraska was turning out 300-400 yards per game on the ground. But you go back, I mentioned the 81 season last week when, that was when Turner Gill took over as the starting quarterback. But they also had Roger Craig and Mike Rozier. We remember the wee-backs with Derek Brown and Calvin Jones. There's always been a little bit of depth in a running back, a number 2 or number 3 even running back even that could do okay. Lawrence and Amon, right? I don't recall Nebraska being in a situation where they had to go so deep to find somebody not just for one game, but for potentially 9.
Well, the most clear as day analysis about Nebraska football is that this is not 1995, and that applies to every measuring stick in the program. And if this was 1995 and you lose 2 backs, well, hey, you know what? There's a high school All-American sitting back there, and maybe there is a high school All-American. Emmett Johnson was a heck of a back in high school, but he hasn't done it in college yet. This isn't a situation where you lose Lawrence Phillips and you got Amon Green. And Amon Green goes down, and you got Clinton Childs and Damon Benning and Jay Sims. I mean, we're in a different universe than that kind of a conversation. So, yeah, it's a lot different than what Nebraska was used to 30 years ago. But in the last few years, they've had some running back depth. But I would also say that they've had some dicey situations here and there, somewhat similar to what they're facing now.
And does anyone know, does Brody Belt still have any eligibility left? Can Nebraska get him on the line? I felt like he was here for forever, always there in the back pocket if you needed him.
Does the transfer portal work during the season?
Come on down, right? Well, we'll see where Nebraska goes with.
Well, let me ask you this real quick.
Did
anybody have Roman Mangini in their Nebraska press conference bingo card today?
Love the name.
But he's a wide receiver, as we found out. But nevertheless, Matt Rule is throwing some names out there of guys that have impressed him, and maybe they've got to find somebody to impress them like that in the running back room.
Did you hear the names that he threw out on Saturday night? I don't want to go down too deep of a rabbit hole here, and we'll talk about the defense later. But the names that he threw out Saturday night, Mike Dawson, Eric Chenander, Bill Bush, and Barrett Ruud.
Yeah.
When have you heard a coach do that?
Yeah.
A head coach do that? Call out the defensive staff. And I'm sure he meant to talk about Travis Fisher too, but just that name slipped his mind.
The thank you cards that were on full display?
Yes.
Because of the players that, he said, running and hitting and swarming to the football's the same in every defense?
He said we inherited a defense that knew how to play, that these guys were coached well by the old staff. But, again, different discussion.
Well, let's get there when we talk about what we saw on Saturday. We go from running back room to Matt Rule's first win, and game ball given to him by Trev Alberts. Workmanlike, and it's, again, one of those games Nebraska could have and has lost in the past, but Nebraska showed a lot of response, not only with commitment to the run game, easing and making things comfortable for Haarberg, but also the defense playing lights out once again.
Right. I mean, the defense just about pitched a shutout. You know, those 8 points at the end were garbage time, much like Nebraska had against Colorado on the last drive of the week before. And the three that came when the game was undecided were on a field goal where Northern Illinois took over at the 5-yard line after Nebraska's only turnover on the second possession. So defense held them under 100 yards until the last couple minutes of the game. That's impressive. This rush defense has given up less than 130 in 3 games total, not average, total. It's among the tops in the whole country. So you can say what you want about the competition. It's not bad. They've played 2 Power 5 teams with decent offenses, and then this Northern Illinois team that was pretty bad offensively, but you got to like what you see out of Tony White, the defensive coordinator in this group. Just the way that they're hitting, the way they're flying to the football. The last thing that they need to do to turn this into a defense that is historically good for Nebraska, and we're not calling it that, but just statistically a historically good defense is start generating turnovers and scoring on defense. And you could kind of sense it as the second half went along on Saturday against Northern Illinois that they were getting close. And finally they did get one pick when Javen Wright caused the turnover and came down with the ball. But it just felt like, and I talked to Steve Warren, the ex-Nebraska great, who was on the sidelines with his son and some of the guys at Omaha West Side and from the Warren Academy at the game Saturday. I talked to Steve about this after the game, that that's the one thing left for this defense to do. And as that second half went along, it felt like things were starting to go downhill toward Nebraska being able to generate some turnovers. So we'll see if they can pick up where they left off against Louisiana Tech.
Go back in time, and when Nebraska made that move back in the early 1990s to move Ed Stewart from safety to linebacker, that was one guy making one move that essentially transformed what Nebraska was doing defensively, adding speed and pursuit and a relentless attack that transformed Nebraska football into a championship team. This seems like they've made a bunch of moves like that, and not necessarily maybe changing of positions, but just changing of assignments and the way guys approach the assignment that they have, the position that they have been playing. In some cases, there have been some differences where guys have gone from the secondary and to a linebacker, or from linebacker to a more of a rush position. But they're in a spot that takes advantage of their speed and athleticism and pursuing the ball, taking the appropriate angles in the 3-3-5, and most importantly, this team tackles unlike any Nebraska defense I think we have seen in the last 5 years. Now, do the math with coaching staffs all you want, and I know that Matt Rule was very complimentary of the previous staff defensively, but this team tackles far better than anything we saw over the last few years. And now if they miss a tackle, it's almost glaring and a surprise as opposed to something you go, I've seen that before.
Well, and I think what really exemplifies that point, Bill, of how this team rallies to the ball is it's not just linebackers and defensive backs rallying to the football. You'll see defensive linemen chasing down plays. They're 5 yards behind the play. It's on the sideline. Who's coming over and cleaning it up? It's Ty Robinson. It's Riley Van Poppel. It's in previous weeks, Cam Linhart. That's something that you haven't quite seen, and it's hard to get some of those defensive linemen moving in that way to say, hey, you know what? If you trust it, if you go rally to the ball, you're going to make a play at some point here. Sometimes it's hard to keep defensive linemen moving that way, and this defensive line does a really, really good job of, you know what, screen plays, that could be my chance to go make a play, even if it's out by the sideline. Slant routes, I'm going to get downfield, and I'm going to see if I can make a tackle. It's those effort plays that I'm seeing all over the defense I think are exemplified by what the defensive line shows, going and flying around the field, rallying to the football, and making it a gang tackle.
You check out the numbers of snaps that the defensive guys, especially on the front group, the front 6 or 7 are playing. And in a game like that, and Northern Illinois snapped it about 60 times. Nobody on that Nebraska front at the linebacker or defensive line level played more than about 34 or 35 snaps, which obviously tells you that they're rotating, they're bringing in young players, they're developing talent, and they're keeping these guys fresh for the weeks ahead, which everything about this defense that I've seen bodes well short-term and long-term. One play that stood out to me, it was a third down situation. Nebraska had Northern Illinois backed up. I think it was in bad territory for the Huskies. They were close to their own goal line, and it was, I was curious as I sat upstairs and watched it, like what Nebraska was going to do. Were they going to bring pressure? Were they going to drop guys back? Were they just going to play it safe and try to get off the field with a punt? And they brought pressure. It was a blitz. And I could not really fathom where the blitzers were coming from. They ran in a strange route, like they were coming around the end, and it was something unlike I'd seen Nebraska blitz before. And they didn't get home, but they put pressure on the quarterback, and they made him make an errant throw. And Rocky Lombardi made a lot of errant throws.
Pressure or not.
But it's just interesting for me to see the way that they're able to disguise some of that stuff and be unique about the way that they bring heat. And that's going to be something that Big Ten teams have to contend with, because this isn't a defensive scheme that they see every week.
Well, you mentioned the interior, and I want to spend a second on just what Nebraska has brewing with the polar bear. Nash Hudmacher, I know Ty Robinson's the name you know, but Nash has jumped his game, 6 tackles, 2.5 sacks, really a force. But guys, it's night and day from, you see Nash in there at the goal line. I remember Wisconsin punching one in a couple of years ago in that 21 season where they just blew up everybody on the line, polar bear included. Now you flip it around, how mobile and agile he is, and his change of direction, his pursuit is something that's jumped up a lot. And you know what? I'm anxious to see him against Big Ten teams. I'm anxious to really gauge Nebraska's line of scrimmage. We've seen Minnesota, yes, but the rest of the Big Ten, and I'm trying to equate what the offensive line got done and then what the defensive line got done against a team in Northern Illinois. What do you take from that game? I take that Nebraska's defense continues to grow and be confident. I take the offensive line, the offense in general, just took a positive step forward, but it was something they needed to have done. But Nash is playing at a super high level, and that's really good news if you're a Nebraska fan.
Is it fair to say that Nash, and maybe this is just me as a Broncos fan, I got the chance to watch him, but Nash has started to play like what Terrence Knighton played like in the NFL. I think Knighton has been a huge addition to Nash Hutmacher's game because they're built similarly. Hey, they're not going to beat you in a 40-yard dash, but it's that strength and that short area quickness that Nash has developed this season that really reminds me of what Pot Roast did during his time in Denver. You don't expect him to be a great pass rusher based on the foot speed, but then he's just such a load inside that a little bull rush and a little rip move, and hey, he's in on the quarterback. I've been really impressed with just how Nash's game has developed in a sense that it almost looks like what I remember Terrence Knighton playing like with the Denver Broncos, and I think Terrence Knighton, you should take the cap off and give him his credit for what he's done for the entire defensive line this season. That group is playing so differently this season, and it's a combination of some newer guys in that defensive line group, some newer faces, but just what he's been able to do with the young guys, getting them ready for rough and tumble football right away. I think Terrence Knighton's done a great job, and I think you've even seen that those defensive linemen, improve from what we saw against Minnesota to what we saw against Northern Illinois. And maybe you have to take the competition in account for that, but it's been younger and younger guys getting on the field, and there doesn't seem to be much drop-off.
Yeah, it makes sense that the polar bear would like a pot roast.
you don't have to worry about those. If you're a defensive line coach, you don't have to have your guys worrying about your 40-yard dash time. Boys, I just need you to be good for about 10 feet. One way or the other.
Blow it up.
Just exactly. Yeah. Be fast, be quick for 10 feet. And you tell Corey Campbell and his staff, I just need him to be quick and fast this far, and that's good, right?
Well, it's realistic. It's not even 10. It's 4 steps. It's
right.
stand up your offensive lineman. What they told us back in high school, and I know they still teach it in football nowadays, is it's heels to heels. You're trying to get where your heels are to where the offensive lineman heels are. If you get them 1 to 2 yards in the backfield, stand them up, that gives your linebackers, who are playing great this season, room to fly around and go make the plays. You might not get your name in the newspaper. You might not get your name talked about on a sports podcast, but you're doing your job by getting those offensive linemen stood up in the backfield, and it lets those guys that we've seen 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage and Nick Heinrich and Luke Reimer and John Bullock, guys that have really been flying around this year, it allows them to play at their best, play free and play fast.
I'll just say this about Nash. He's great. He's been playing great. He's a guy who's developed over the course of his career. He looks a lot better. He's always been one of the strongest players on the team. And when you can keep him in that short amount of space, he's fantastic. He loses a little bit when he has to get out on the edge and try to chase the quarterback around. That's not his forte at 330 pounds. And we saw that a bit in the second half against Colorado and Shadur Sanders. When you put him out there and he's got to chase a guy from sideline to sideline, that's not what Nash Hutmacher should be doing. And I understand he has to in that situation. But if teams can find a way to extend things out and you have a mobile quarterback, then I think that becomes a little bit more troublesome for him.
Should be noted. Pot roast, Terrence Knight. That wasn't his forte in the NFL either, and he still made some good money off of it.
Yep, stop the run and collapse the inner pocket. This is the Average Joe Sports Show. Find it on YouTube. Get a subscribe. Hit that button and follow us along the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube. The AJ Sports Pod. Give us a follow on Twitter. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. And guys, because of the breaking news with the running back situation, it has let us pontificate further on the quarterback discussion with Heinrich Haarberg, Jeff Sims. What does Nebraska do moving forward? And it's going to be a competition. And do you have a situation where Sims, what's he look like in practice this week? Is he healthy? Is he good to go? And is he up to speed when it comes to playing at a high level? And then you have Haarberg, who you got to feel good about that you have an option at least, and he did more than hold his own in that first start of his career. I was trying to think of native Nebraskan starters, right? You got Sundberg, you've got Crouch, you've got Fife that come to mind. The Count of Monte Cristo. I mean, there's
Tim Hager.
Yeah, Hager's.
Is he a quarterback?
I don't know. It's going over my head with Hager, but I kind of. I spent
Claridge.
I spent my
going way back. Tony Veland played some quarterback.
Veland
in practice.
In practice before the son. We're going to put you at safety, and Veland was awesome and is awesome. But yeah, you had a native Nebraskan behind center and in the pistol and ran some option and looked like that arm was still live. Guys, what'd you think? What'd you think of Haarberg? And at least you have somebody that's made a start and won as a starter here moving forward.
I think the good news for Nebraska is that you do have somebody that you can say is a proven backup quarterback. Now, whether that is Jeff Sims or whether that's Heinrich Haarberg. If Haarberg starts and something should happen and Sims has to come in, I think you feel good about your quarterback spot. If Sims gets his starting job back against Louisiana Tech or down the road, you feel good that Heinrich Haarberg played well enough, got Nebraska a win, and it was a win in which you didn't feel good afterward. Nebraska did what it was supposed to do in beating Northern Illinois. One thing that comes to my mind about this, too, is, Matt Rule has talked about, the Tom Osborne influence, if you will, and the practice stations. There were times over the last 20 years where coaching staffs would give all of the snaps in practice to your first, maybe second unit guys. I knew of times where guys told me I didn't even bother taping up to go to practice because all I was going to do was stand around and play catch. And that's the NFL mentality. So you have guys who are actively participating from the first unit to the fourth or fifth unit where they are playing and they are getting snaps. And that's the way Tom did it way back in the day. So that, guys who were on the fourth team still got 70 snaps. And I don't know how many they're getting now, but it's clear these guys are getting some work so that they do know that when their time is called and when they point to them to go to someplace in the playbook, they do know where to go. So Nebraska's got guys who at least are on the right page when called upon.
So Heinrich didn't get any snaps last year. Matt Rule mentioned today on Monday as we're taping, that Heinrich wasn't even in meetings with the quarterbacks last year because he was relegated to the scout team and had to be ready to go to give the defense a simulated look of what it might face on the coming Saturday. So he has come all the way up the ladder in a short period of time. And you could hear the grateful tone in Haarberg's voice after the victory on Saturday night. He said, this is what Coach Rule does, that if you practice well, you're going to play. And he's walking evidence of that. But it's not just him. It's guys throughout his recruiting class, that 2021 recruiting class, and I'm going to look at this more in depth in a story this week in The Athletic. Those guys, that class, more than half of it has left the program. About half of it. I believe it's 9 out of 20. And just about everybody else in that group is showing signs of significant development here in their third year in the program with Matt Rule. So the development phase of what Matt Rule wants to do and what he wants to bring to Lincoln is working and showing that it's working 3 games into this thing. And Heinrich Haarberg is probably, along with Thomas Fidone, the tight end that he's connected with for 2 touchdowns in 2 games. Those guys are Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 on this thing. As for where this quarterback thing's going, I don't know. Sims made it back to practice on Sunday. I think they've got a really tough decision about what you want to do, especially when you consider the opponent that's up next week after Louisiana Tech, because whoever's going to play against Michigan, I think probably needs to be the guy who plays against Louisiana Tech. So one little thing to look at, they put an or on the depth chart. I've got the depth chart in front of me here. They put an or on the depth chart that wasn't there a week ago between Jeff Sims and Heinrich Haarberg. Interestingly, on the offensive side at least, all of the other ors and the way that this was supposed to work and said to have worked at the beginning of the season was if there's an or, they list the players alphabetically. Borkercher over Fidone, Coleman over Lloyd, you got Bonner over Liebentritt. At quarterback, it's Sims or Haarberg. Now,
dun, dun, dun.
I think the S is ahead of H in the alphabet. No, the H is ahead of S in the alphabet. So, Nebraska's ultra sensitive to this and how it looks. And if you put Heinrich Haarberg above Jeff Sims on the depth chart, even with that or between them, everybody was going to say he's the starter. And, Jeff Sims has been thrown out with yesterday's lunch. So we'll see. This is a dramatic situation and, an early moment for Matt Rule to show how things are going to work in his program long term.
And if it is Sims, I think Haarberg plays.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
He'll play against La Tech.
I think you need to see both
reverse.
guys. I think you need to see both guys. I think the biggest credit to what I saw from Haarberg on Saturday that shows me he's got a real shot at being the starter moving forward is how he led by example from the front with what Matt Rule has preached about physicality. And there was a great quote that Heinrich Haarberg told our friend Kevin Suits, saying, Tommy Frazier and Eric Crouch met with me after the game, and they told me I need to slide more, and I said, I never saw you guys sliding. Think about what what type of mentality Matt Rhule's been trying to instill in his program. You saw on the Look-In series saying, we want to be physical. What we do here is not easy. You've heard it since day one of Matt Rhule being introduced. He said it in his introductory press conference. We want to be a physical, hard-nosed football team. What does Heinrich Haarberg go out there and do on a Saturday evening at Memorial Stadium? He's lowering the boom on defensive backs. He's not sliding. He's fighting for that extra yardage. It means something when your quarterback is leading from the front, doing that, using that physicality, doing everything that your coach has preached. On the other hand, you have Jeff Sims, who's had his turnover issues, but I think you can see from an eye test, he's more comfortable standing in the pocket and delivering a pass and not being completely flustered by a defensive lineman running him down. He's got the arm talent. You see him throw that thing on a frozen rope every single time he does, but he's had the turnover issues. I think there's pros and cons to having each guy start, but I think that's the biggest credit to Heinrich Haarberg, and what I saw on Saturday was just how willing he is to be physical, because really, truthfully, the rest of your offense does see your quarterback lowering the shoulder on somebody and saying, you know what, if my quarterback can do it, I can do it.
You're gonna need both guys throughout the season because of the amount of times they're being asked to carry the football. That's focal point of this offense is quarterback run, whatever it takes to get it done running the football for Nebraska. But the passing game's where I'm going to go. What quarterback right now has the best upside as a thrower, at least a threat? And you've got two samples from Sims that weren't great, but he did throw some nice passes. I'm not saying there's not possibilities there. The same with Haarberg. Out of the gate, they hit Washington on that slant. He had some nice completions on some third and longs. Nebraska was in third and long a lot. You saw, dare I say, a screen pass that was complete for a lot of yards. So you'll need to make sure that the passing game is serviceable, and in some instances with what's left on the schedule, the passing game is suitable enough to be at least threatening. So this run game that can take a while to get going is not just one-dimensional.
You know, Heinrich Haarberg and Jeff Sims, I think if you put them in a room and they dissected film and you talked to them about quarterback play and you went out on the field and they had to make every throw, Jeff Sims is gonna win that battle. And it's why he won the starting quarterback job in the offseason, why he was the clear number one, because he had started 23 games at the position coming into this season, and Heinrich Haarberg had not played in college. Now that number is 25 games for Sims and 1 game for Haarberg. I think that's an interesting thing, an important thing to know going forward, because which one of those two has the most opportunity to grow from here? Jeff Sims is who he is. He started 25 games. I think you know what you're going to get, and maybe that's good. Maybe that's the best for Nebraska. Maybe those turnovers were somewhat of an aberration. He didn't turn it over at that rate last year, and he's had issues throughout his career, but last year it wasn't at that rate. He is what he is, though. Heinrich Haarberg is very much a work in progress. 1 game as a starter. You would think that as this season goes on, if he's given an opportunity, he's going to grow and get a lot better.
1 game against Northern Illinois, not against Minnesota with a solid secondary on the road in the opener, and not against a very athletic secondary from Colorado also on the road. So, I mean, you can. This is a game that you absolutely cannot play. What if Nebraska had opened with Northern Illinois like everybody else did, had that kind of game right out of the gate? You know, what would that have done for Jeff Sims and his confidence to, you know, Elijah used the term that he throws or delivers. Well, we see him throw. Does he deliver? You know, he's made a couple of bad decisions, you know, at Minnesota, the interception in the back of the end zone instead of throwing to the tight end at the goal line. The interception that he threw to the sidelines at Colorado. Bad decision making. But again, the test that he's had has been far more difficult, Sims, than it was last Saturday for Heinrich Haarberg taking on, let's face it, Northern Illinois secondary was not very good. And that was, as much as Matt Rhule said, you know, that was a great football team, and I know they played BC close and who played Florida State close. That was not a great team. You know, it was a great opportunity for Nebraska to do what it needed to do, and it did it well.
Well, get the job done is what Nebraska fans are thinking. Whoever's at quarterback Saturday, we'll have another pod later in the week with some thoughts with probably a little bit more clarity on the quarterback situation. But 2 weeks, Michigan looms, 2:30 kickoff on Fox. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, The Average Joe Sports Show, The Average Joe Sports Show pod. Find it on Twitter, the AJSS Sports Pod is where you go, and the @Average Joe Sports Pod is where you follow on Twitter. Do so on YouTube as well, the Average Joe Sports Show. Look that up, subscribe. We appreciate that. Guys, as we wind down, Saturday night was what for you? Were you sucked into Colorado State? I know Bill and I were asked to leave a bar, not for being unruly, but just because, it was closing time and overtime had not started yet.
Colorado State, I think, took a little bit of a page out of Nebraska's playbook in that it was a very physical team, especially against their secondary. Now, Nebraska did not quite go after Travis Hunter the way Colorado State did, but
that was awful.
I think Nebraska's physicality was something that Jay Norvell noted, and look, they certainly played well enough to win. Why they folded with their defensive scheme in the final 2 minute and a half of the game, Shedeur Sanders, that's a drive for history. If they go on and have a magical season, they'll remember that drive forever in Boulder. If he wins the Heisman, that will be his forever highlight, right? But Colorado State gave Colorado everything that it wanted, and I just think there was a lot of blueprints out there for people, for their teams to know how that they can beat Colorado and slow that Buffalo down.
Nebraska tried with Travis Hunter to be physical and slammed him to the ground a couple times in plays that were legal, mind you.
Not a sideline.
That was an assault
death shot.
I was going to say the same thing.
And he's going to be out for 3 weeks, which is really at least 3 weeks, which is really disappointing from a national level because they've got Oregon this Saturday and USC a week from Saturday. So things are about to get real for Colorado. And they're a 20-plus point underdog going to Eugene, Oregon on Saturday night. I will say, and we can just rebrand this thing as the Dion show, right? I mean,
Sure, right.
That's what it's going to be. We've had 2 episodes, and we've talked about Dion in both episodes. But that's just fall. That's what college.
Everybody else is.
We
that's
have
what college
to as
football
broadcasters.
Is. I will say that I got sucked in on Saturday night. These night games are tough for a writer like me. First of all, I have a serious problem that has resurfaced this year, where the Valentino's pizza in the press box. That wasn't even the press box. Now we're working in the new media room in the Hawks Center. So I had gotten to the point where I could bring myself to avoid that. And no, there is no worse combination for trying not to eat pizza at 11 o'clock at night than having a game end and a story to write with the knowledge in your head that you have to drive back to Omaha, where I live in Gretna, and then work for another 3 or 4 hours, and there's a game on that I want to watch. I just had zero possibility to withstand the urge to eat all the Valentino's pizza that existed in that media workroom. So, unfortunately, I did that, and then I hit the road and wanted to sleep when I got home. But it was just entering the fourth quarter in Boulder, so I sat down, forget about the story that I've got to write, and I watched Colorado State, and I watched Jay Norvell's team, and hey, how about Jay Norvell resurfacing on the map? The former Nebraska offensive coordinator, there he is. Big story last week was Jay Norvell, and they gave it away at the end, and then the overtime. Why Colorado State didn't go for 2 after it scored a touchdown in the first overtime and had a chance just to walk away a winner? Yep. I can't answer that one today, but the Buffs kept it going. And I was up until 3:30 in the morning and then had a stomachache on Sunday.
Mitch, tell me, what's the harder urge to resist? Is it that Val's Pizza, or is it Colorado student section rushing the field after every win?
The urge is strong for the CU students. I will say that. The way that they come into the stadium chanting and ready to go, even for a 10 o'clock kickoff Mountain Time like we saw a week ago in Boulder, they got it going on right now. Colorado students, tip of the cap to the Colorado students for their exuberance. I didn't sense that from the Nebraska students on Saturday night. I walked around the stadium on the sidelines hour and a half before kickoff when they were in their seats, and they came in and they sat in their seats, and they sat there fairly quiet. It had the momentum and the energy in Memorial Stadium on Saturday night came from the Nebraska defense. And from Heinrich Haarberg on that first drive. Not from the student section, not from the 90,000 or 85,000 plus that were in the stadium. And that's the difference between being an 0-2 team going into your home opener and being a 2-0 team as the Buffs were on Saturday in Boulder.
Everyone was holding their breath at Memorial Stadium, wondering how this thing was going to go. We'll see if the energy and fanaticism is at the level it's at now in the next 2 weeks for Boulder. As you're right, it gets real for Dion and company at Oregon for a showdown against Uncle Phil and the Ducks. And then SC comes to town. A little insult to injury, potentially. Guys, another fun episode. Elijah, did you have something real quick? Nope, you're good? Okay, that is the Average Joe Sports Show. And catch us in podcast form, Google Play, Spotify, and Apple. Also subscribe to that. Find the video portion, the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube. Subscribe to that. And as always, find us on Twitter. Give us a follow there. That is the AJ Sports Pod. That is Mitch Sherman, Mr. Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Talk to you later in the week here with the Average Joe Sports Show.